Zola had always been a loving and devoted wife to Darius. Their marriage, though filled with struggles, was built on hope and perseverance. For 5 long years, they endured financial hardships together, holding on to the dream that one day things would get better. Then one fateful day, Darius received an invitation to a high-profile business meeting. He had always been ambitious, and this opportunity seemed like the breakthrough they had been praying for. From that day, the downfall of their marriage started. Keep watching the story of Zola and Darius. In the heart of California, nestled between the buzz of business towers and the quiet charm of old neighborhoods, lived a woman named Zola. She was the kind of woman who gave her all to her home, her marriage, and the man she loved. Zola and her husband Darius had built their marriage on shared dreams, held together by faith, grit, and the kind of love that doesn't easily break. For 3 long years they had struggled side by side through the weight of bills, broken down cars, late rent notices, and jobs that barely paid enough. They shared their meals, their laughter, and their fears in a cramped apartment that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and old coffee. Still, Zola believed in tomorrow. And Darius, with his wide shoulders and hopeful eyes, had promised her that one day everything would change. And then one bright Monday morning, change came knocking. Darius had received an email from a prestigious tech firm inviting him to a high-profile investor pitch event, the kind of opportunity people waited their whole lives for. That morning, Zola packed his best shirt, kissed his cheek with trembling lips, and told him he was going to shine. She didn't know that her words would be the last thing she'd say to the man she thought she knew. Days passed and Zola waited. She sat by the kitchen window every evening, watching the sun paint the sky gold, hoping to hear the sound of Darius's keys in the door. But the door stayed closed. His phone went straight to voicemail. Her text remained unread. Each passing hour stretched longer, filled with worry that turned into dread. On the 5th day, her friend Nina called, hesitant and whispering, "Zola... Darius is staying at the Belrose Grand downtown. I saw him. He... He wasn't alone." Zola's hand shook as she dropped the phone. The Belrose Grand? That was where celebrities and CEOs spent their nights. Her heart pounded like footsteps chasing her in a dark alley as she threw on a jacket and caught a late train to downtown Los Angeles. The hotel lobby gleamed with marble floors and golden chandeliers. She stepped in, her breath shallow, her eyes scanning, and there he was. Darius, standing in a tailored blazer, gold watch glinting, smelling of expensive cologne. But what made her chest tighten was not his transformation. It was the woman beside him, young, stunning, dressed like money and power. Her hand wrapped around Darius's arm like she owned it. Zola walked toward them, voice trembling. "Darius, what is going on? I've been calling you for days. What happened to the meeting? Did you land the contract? And... who is she?" Before he could answer, the woman smirked and said, "I'm Liana, Darius's wife now. He doesn't waste time on low-class women like you anymore." Zola blinked, as if slapped by the very air. Did you just call me a pig?" she whispered, voice cracking. Her eyes searched Darius's face for any flicker of guilt, of kindness, of the man she knew. But his face was hard, unreadable. "Zola," he said, cold as steel, "don't look for me again. We're done. I'll send you some money. My lawyer will deliver the divorce papers. Just sign them." It felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. Her legs wobbled. Her chest felt hollow. She barely noticed the people passing by until one voice said gently, "Zola, is that really you?" She turned. There stood a man, tall, clean-shaven, with a familiar warmth in his eyes. "Zola," he said again, smiling gently. "It's Malik. Okay. We went to Fremont Middle together." Zola gasped. Malik, her childhood friend, the shy boy who used to walk her home. But now he was all grown up, tall, dressed in a sleek suit, radiating success. Tears slipped from her eyes. "Malik, I can't believe it." He looked past her to Darius and Liana, eyes narrowing. "Is this your husband? I saw what just happened." Zola nodded. "He was. Not anymore. He left me because I gained weight. Sighed I wasn't worthy of his new life." Malik's jaw tightened. "That's strange," he said, voice sharp. "Because I'm the investor who approved his funding." Zola stared, stunned. Malik's tone softened. "Don't worry. I'll take care of it." Darius and Liana turned and vanished into the hotel, laughing. Malik turned to Zola. "Do you have a place to go?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." His voice lowered. "Then come with me. I have a guest room. Stay as long as you need." She hesitated. "Your wife, won't she mind you bringing someone like me into your home?" Malik laughed. "I'm not married. And even if I were, you're not just someone. You're Zola, come on." And just like that, the door to a new life opened. The ride through the Los Angeles streets was quiet. Zola stared out the window as neon lights and shadows flickered across her face. Just hours earlier, she had been a devoted wife waiting for good news. Now she was nothing, or so she felt. Malik said little, letting the silence hold space for her grief. His car was sleek, the leather seats soft, the hum of the engine soothing in a way she hadn't expected. When they arrived at his home nestled in the hills of Pasadena, Zola's mouth parted in awe. The house was more of a villa, all curved glass, open spaces, and the gentle trickle of water from a koi pond near the entryway. Malik parked and came around to open her door. She stepped out slowly, her shoes tapping against the polished stone. "Pathway, you live here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, unlocking the front door. "One of my homes. But this one is my favorite." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and lavender. Zola paused in the grand foyer, staring at the cascading staircase and the chandelier that glittered like ice. Malik motioned toward the kitchen. "You hungry? I can order something." She shook her head. "Let me cook. It'll keep me grounded." He chuckled. "Fair enough. Kitchen's yours." The kitchen was a dream massive island, marble countertops, a refrigerator that lit up when you knocked. Zola felt a flicker of herself come alive. As she opened cabinets for spices, her fingers brushed against a worn book tucked in beside the herbs. It was old, its cover decorated with red leaves in Chinese script. She pulled it out, a traditional herbal weight loss guide. Curiosity piqued, she flipped through it, reading about teas and body balancing meals. Just then, Malik's voice floated in, warm and amused. "That was my mother's. She used it years ago and transformed herself. Said it helped her heal more than just her body." Zola looked up, surprised. "She was big?" Malik nodded. "Bigger than she wanted to be. But she changed. Slowly, with intention." Zola traced a finger along a hand-drawn recipe. "Maybe I should try it," Malik smiled. "If you want, I'll help you." Every step of the way. And for the first time in days, Zola let herself smile back. Not for revenge, not for Darius, but for herself. The days that followed moved slowly, like the final minutes of a sunset that didn't want to end. Zola stayed mostly in the guest room, where the soft cotton curtains danced in the afternoon breeze, and the scent of gardenias from the backyard reminded her of her late grandmother's porch in South Central. Grief was a strange thing. It didn't cry out all at once. It crept in quietly, hiding in cups of untouched tea, the silence between text alerts that never came, and the feeling that someone had snatched the ground right out from under your feet. Malik never pushed her to talk. He simply existed around her like a calm ocean, steady and deep. He worked from home most days, his office filled with African masks, jazz vinyls, and a giant whiteboard covered in startup plans and strategies. Zola didn't even try to understand. But every evening, he cooked her something warm: stewed lentils, roasted yams with rosemary, spicy jollof rice that made her sweat and laugh. They talked then about music, about childhood, about what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you trusted with your soul. One morning, Zola stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Not because she had lost weight, but because she was still standing, stronger than she'd expected to be. The next day, she picked up the Chinese weight loss book again. But this time, not just to read. She flipped to a marked page titled, Bitter Roots, Sweet Ends, and nodded. That afternoon, she asked Malik to take her shopping. They visited a local herbal store in Koreatown, where the owner, a sharp-eyed woman with silver braids, helped them gather dried flowers, lotus seeds, licorice root, and leaves that smelled like clean earth. That evening, Zola brewed her first tea. It was bitter, yes, but something about the taste grounded her. It reminded her that healing wasn't supposed to be sweet at first. She began walking every morning through the hills, each step burning but necessary. She started journaling, pouring her shame, her anger, and her blooming courage into the pages. Malik noticed the shift. One night, as they sat under string lights in the backyard, sipping herbal water, he turned to her. "You're changing," he said softly. Zola chuckled. "Yeah, into a bitter tea-drinking weirdo." He smiled. "No, into the woman you were always meant to become." For a moment, she felt something stir in her, a quiet hope, warm and slow, like sunrise. She didn't want to rush it. She didn't even want to name it yet, but it was there. Weeks passed, then months. Zola's face grew slimmer, yes, but her laugh got louder too. Her eyes sparkled with something that hadn't been there before: power. Her body was transforming, but so was her spirit. She wore dresses now that she used to hide in the back of her closet. She took Malik's calls in the middle of the day, offering suggestions on his marketing pitch, surprising even herself. One day, she joined him on a meeting with a fashion startup he was mentoring. They were hosting a gallery dinner in Santa Monica, and he asked her to come. "You belong in this room now," he said. "You always did." That night, the sky above the coast was streaked with rose and gold, the kind of California sunset that made people believe in magic. Zola wore a simple but striking emerald green dress that hugged her just right. Her hair was styled and thick, natural coils, and her lipstick matched the power in her walk. As they entered the event, people turned. Not because she was flashy, but because she glowed. The old Zola might have shrunk under their eyes. This Zola smiled. Malik beamed at her with quiet pride. "You look like a woman who owns her story," he whispered. "Because I do," she whispered back. Then, across the crowd, someone caught her eye. Across the softly lit banquet hall, amidst murmurs of tech trends and the clinking of champagne glasses, stood the man she had once waited days for: Darius. He was thinner than she remembered, but not in a way that looked healthy. His tailored suit didn't sit right on his shoulders, and the glint in his eyes was gone, replaced by something restless, haunted. He was not alone. Liana was with him. Of course, clinging to his side like a vine to a crumbling wall. Her glittering dress screamed money, but her face, once smug and sharp, looked drawn, tired, almost desperate to be seen. Darius was mid-conversation with someone, but his eyes drifted. And when they landed on Zola, everything around him seemed to fade. His brow furrowed, his mouth opened slightly. And for a moment, he just stared, as if trying to place her in the mosaic of his past. Liana followed his gaze and scoffed. "What? Do you know her?" she asked, a little too loudly. "She looks like a model," she added with a sneer masked as curiosity. But Darius didn't answer. He took one slow step forward, and then another. "Zola?" he asked, disbelief cracking through his voice. Zola didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She smiled. A calm, dignified smile that held more weight than 1,000 angry words. "Hello, Darius," she said. Her voice was warm, even, like someone who had made peace with a past that no longer owned her. Darius blinked again, trying to reconcile the memory of the woman he left with the goddess before him. You look different," he stammered. "I know," she said. Malik, who had stayed a step behind to give her space, finally joined her side, placing a gentle hand on the small of her back. He looked at Darius with a mixture of amusement and mild warning. "Is there a problem?" Malik asked. Darius cleared his throat, forced a smile, and shook his head. No problem. Just surprised, that's all." Zola leaned in slightly, just enough for her words to hit home. "The woman you abandoned doesn't exist anymore." Her words hung between them like smoke, and for the first time in his life, Darius was speechless. Malik took her hand, and they walked away past Darius, past Liana, past everything that once held her down. Later that night, as they sat side by side in Malik's garden, Zola took a slow breath. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said. Malik turned toward her. "I didn't even feel angry, just free." He nodded. "Because you are." She looked up at the stars. "He thought leaving me would break me, but it was the making of me." Weeks after that fateful night at the gallery, Zola's world kept unfolding like a garden finally allowed to breathe. She had started consulting with Malik's team on branding projects, first just as a voice in the room, then slowly, as a presence that couldn't be ignored. Her confidence wasn't loud, but it echoed. It showed in how she walked into boardrooms wearing earth-tone suits and kente print scarves, in how she spoke with clarity that made executives lean in. She still drank her bitter teas every morning, still wrote in her journal before bed, and still took her evening walks under the orange glow of Pasadena street lamps. But the woman she was now didn't just move differently, she believed differently. She believed in her power, in her right to joy, in her right to start over without shame. One Thursday morning, she received a call from Malik's assistant, urging her to come to the firm right away. A large manila envelope was waiting on her desk. Inside were legal documents and a project report, one from Darius's company, tied to the very contract he had once bragged about. The numbers didn't lie. The work was incomplete, the funds mismanaged, and several project deadlines had passed without delivery. Zola's chest tightened, but not with sadness, with resolve. She walked straight to Malik's office, handed him the envelope, and said, "It's time." That afternoon, Malik's legal team drafted a formal notice Darius's company was being investigated for breach of contract, and unless he delivered on the remaining obligations in 4 weeks, he'd be forced to refund the full amount or face seizure of assets. Zola read the final draft carefully, then signed her name at the bottom, her handwriting steady and bold. Days later, Darius showed up at the firm, looking worn out and nervous. He asked to see Zola directly. She met him in the executive conference room, seated at the head of a long oak table, sunlight catching the subtle gold flecks in her eyeshadow. He entered slowly, eyes lowered, hands fidgeting. "Zola. Please," he began, his voice already cracking. "I didn't think things would go this way. Liana's gone. The money's almost gone. I just need more time." Zola looked at him without pity, but not without humanity. "You had time, Darius. You chose to spend it drinking champagne in someone else's bed while the foundation of your promises crumbled. This isn't personal. This is business." He looked like he might fall apart right there in the chair, but Zola remained composed. "You have 4 weeks. Deliver what you owe or repay every cent. It's not up for debate." Darius opened his mouth to beg again, but Zola had already stood. The conversation was over. The days that followed were filled with desperation for Darius. Every door he knocked on echoed with rejection. The friends who once praised his ambition now avoided his calls. The investors who had smiled at him over rooftop cocktails now deleted his messages before reading them. His company was bleeding out, the bank accounts thinner by the day. And with Liana gone, having packed her bags the moment the money began to fade, he was left alone to face the ruin he had built with arrogance. He stayed in a crumbling rented apartment now, the kind where the walls were too thin and the silence at night screamed at you. One afternoon, he sat slouched at a worn-out desk with bills spread out like landmines, his eyes hollow, his fingers trembling. He reached for his phone again, scrolling past unanswered messages, until he stopped on one contact, Zola. His thumb hovered over the call button. And then, with a shaking breath, he pressed it, but it didn't ring. It went straight to voicemail. A robotic tone followed. This user is no longer accepting calls. And that was it. The final thread of hope snapped in his hand like brittle rope. That night, an official letter was taped to his door, from Malik's legal team. It was short, formal, ruthless. Unless the full amount was returned within 14 business days, legal action would proceed, and his remaining assets would be frozen. Darius sat down on the cold tile floor, surrounded by past due notices, and cried, not the quiet kind. The guttural, shaking kind that sounded like the end of a man. Meanwhile, across the city, Zola's life had become something different entirely. Not flashy, not fairy tale, but real. Rich with quiet victories. Her mornings began with meditation and tea under the lemon tree in Malik's backyard. Her days were filled with client meetings, creative brainstorming, and designing campaigns that honored Black beauty, heritage, and innovation. Her evenings were often spent with Malik, cooking barefoot in the kitchen to the rhythm of Fela Kuti or Nina Simone. Their connection had grown into something unspoken, sacred, and tender. They hadn't said the words yet, but they didn't have to. One evening, while she stood folding fresh linens, her phone buzzed. It was an internal notification from the legal team. Darius had failed to meet the revised deadline. A lawsuit would proceed. Zola closed the message without a second thought. She didn't celebrate. She didn't feel vindicated. She simply finished folding the last towel, walked to the window, and looked at the moon rising over the city that had once felt like it might swallow her whole. But now it looked like home. The court case moved swiftly. Within a few short weeks, Darius's accounts were frozen, his company was officially dissolved, and what little property he had left, an Audi, a leased condo, and some digital assets, was seized. It didn't make a dent in what he owed, but the judgment was clear. He had failed in every way that mattered. In the media, whispers about his downfall began to circulate, once praised as a rising star in the startup world, now reduced to a cautionary tale. Zola never spoke about it publicly. When reporters reached out for comments, she declined with grace, saying only, "We all face consequences. What matters is what we learn from them." But in private, she allowed herself one small ritual. She took the court's final ruling and tucked it into the pages of the Chinese herbal guide that had started her journey. Not as a trophy, but as a marker. A reminder that healing and justice can both exist in one woman's hands. Around this time, her relationship with Malik bloomed into something undeniable. They had danced around the edges of romance for months, sharing space, stories, meals, but now it moved like music between them, unafraid and open. One Sunday morning, Malik took her by the hand after breakfast and led her outside. The air smelled of citrus and jasmine. A breeze moved through the olive trees lining the back patio. He cleared his throat, nervous for the first time. "Zola," he said, "you already know how I feel about you. But I want to make it official. This house, this life. It means nothing to me if you're not in it." Her heart stuttered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, not massive, but beautiful, with a single sunstone that glowed like firelight. "Will you build a future with me?" She didn't hesitate. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because he had seen her in her brokenness and loved her through her rising. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. The day of the wedding dawned gently, as if the skies themselves wanted to bless Zola's new beginning. The ceremony wasn't grand in size, but rich in meaning. Held at a small hillside vineyard overlooking the California Valley, every detail reflected the woman Zola had become. The chairs were draped in gold and ivory cloth, the altar woven with eucalyptus marigold, and sage plants rooted in ancestral healing. Her dress was not white, but deep cream with hand-stitched patterns inspired by West African textiles, fitted to her new figure not to flaunt it, but to honor it. Her hair was wrapped in a crown of loques and gold beads, each movement shimmering like the sunlight that poured through the olive trees above. As she stood before Moloch, surrounded by old friends, new allies, and the soft sound of wind chimes in the trees, she did not think of Darius. She didn't need to. That chapter had closed with grace, not bitterness. She had forgiven the man who broke her, not to free him, but to free herself. And now she stood taller than ever, not just in posture, but in presence. Moloch looked at her like she was the sun itself, and when the vows were spoken, there wasn't a dry eye in the vineyard. "I choose you," he said, voice steady, "not because you need me, but because you stand so strong on your own." Zola took his hands, kissed his palms, and whispered, "And I choose you, because in your love I remembered how to love myself." That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of plum and flame, the couple danced barefoot on the grass, laughter weaving through the sound of drums and soft saxophone. The guests clapped and cheered, a community bearing witness to rebirth. Zola twirled, arms open wide, the hem of her dress catching air like wings. She had not just survived betrayal, she had transcended it. She had turned pain into purpose, silence into voice, shame into power. And now, in the arms of a man who saw her completely, she knew one truth deeper than any vow: she had become her own salvation. Somewhere across the state, Darius sat alone in a studio apartment, watching the light fade through cracked blinds. He would never know the peace she had found. And that too was justice. As the stars emerged and candles flickered across wine glasses, Zola stepped away for a moment to breathe in the night. She placed a hand over her heart and smiled, not because her story had ended, but because a new one had just begun. And this time, she was the author. After the guests had left and the music had faded into the stars, Zola and Moloch stayed back at the vineyard in the quiet dark, holding hands beneath a sky splashed with constellations. Lanterns still glowed softly from the branches, and the scent of lavender and charcoal from the evening fire lingered in the air. Zola leaned her head on Moloch's shoulder. "Do you think my grandmother would be proud?" she asked quietly. Moloch kissed her forehead. "She'd be singing your name to the wind." Zola smiled. "She used to say, 'Never let sorrow steal your shine.' I didn't understand it until now." They sat in silence for a while, wrapped in each other, wrapped in peace. The next morning, they woke in a sunlit room of the vineyard's guest house. Zola walked barefoot to the balcony, overlooking rows of grapevines and rolling hills. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a nonprofit she'd contacted months ago, a women's advocacy group in East LA, asking if she'd come speak at their annual gathering. She stared at the screen, heart thudding. Then she smiled. "Yes," she typed. "I'd be honored." That moment sparked a new fire in her. Her healing wasn't hers alone. It was meant to ripple. A week later, Zola stood in front of 50 women in a community center decorated with paper flowers and handwritten posters about strength. She told her story, not the version edited for comfort, but the truth. About being left, about losing herself, about finding her voice again, about the morning she brewed bitter tea and made the choice to rise. When she finished, the room was silent. Then applause erupted, not polite but powerful, like thunder. Women hugged her. Some cried. One older woman whispered, "You gave me courage to start again." That night, Zola sat in her car with Malik beside her, and tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from release. "I didn't know I had this in me," she whispered. Malik took her hand. "You always did. Now the world knows too." Months passed. Zola started a foundation called the Bloom Initiative, helping women rebuild after emotional and financial abuse. She held workshops, wrote articles, and eventually published a memoir titled Bitter Roots, Sweet Ends. It hit bestseller lists and sparked conversations across the country. On the book's dedication page, she wrote, "For every woman who thought her story ended with heartbreak, it doesn't. It begins there." 1 year after their wedding, Zola stood once again under the lemon tree, barefoot and glowing, her hand resting on the curve of her belly. Malik stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. "A girl," she whispered. "We're going to raise a girl." Malik smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "Then she'll grow up knowing that no part of her story, no shape, no sorrow, no scar makes her less worthy of love or power." And when the first drops of spring rain kissed the soil around them, Zola lifted her face to the sky and whispered a quiet prayer, not for escape, but for more sunrises, more healing, more fierce beginnings.